Ty, why don't you talk about some of the what you discovered in Lawrence's books that were really interesting for you?
Oh my gosh, Lawrence's, I read the one book, which was the Kundalini Awakening book, has so much valuable information about Kundalini. I told him that that will probably be one of the books that I start recommending to people. I've always recommended Mukbananda's books because that's been my main focus. Um, so much revelation for me as far as I went through a huge clearing this year. After 20 some years of having my Kundalini processes working, getting Devi Bhav and working with people and giving Shaktipat, something blew me away
Mm.
in February and March of this year. And that was just one instance in your book where it clicked for me. And I said, oh, that's what was happening.
Mm.
Uh, there were a lot of moments where I was just able to click in and really relate. So it's just very valuable
Mm.
information for anyone having a Kundalini awakening or anyone who wants to have a Kundalini awakening.
Well,
Yeah.
for people maybe who don't know what that means, do you want to define that, Lawrence, what Kundalini awakening is? Because, I mean, it's different for everyone, but how would you
Right.
define that?
Right. Sure. Well, and especially the book and the what goes with it is also there's a 7.5 hour CD audio program of the same title, Awakening Kundalini: The Path to Radical Freedom, and they go together as and really create a whole course. So there's the written material. The book is a bit different than the audio program that has guided practices and support for people. And it was written with the understanding, as Tammy Simon, the publisher of Sounds True, had contacted me, said, people are going through spontaneous kinds of experiences and not knowing what they are, how to make sense of it, and you go on the internet and there's all kinds of stuff, and half of it traumatizes people and half of it misleads them, and so let's do something that's going to be helpful and just put it out there to support people. And so that's what the book and the audio program were really aimed at. My first book, The Soul's Journey, was a more personal look at the experience of the unfolding of Kundalini. But Kundalini as a term, it gets bandied about in a lot of different ways, and so it actually winds up losing its meaning. And it's really, to understand Kundalini truly is to understand this is the most profound
Hmm.
consciousness in the universe.
Yes.
Kundalini isn't a thing. Kundalini isn't something you have like an appendix. Kundalini is everything about you, known and unknown. Kundalini is all of it. Kundalini Shakti. Shakti is the universal power of consciousness. This is what creates the body, sustains the body. This is what creates every thought in your mind. It creates every cell in your brain. So Kundalini is the foundation of really all of creation. And specifically when we talk about Kundalini Shakti as a power inherent to each human being, then we're talking about it especially in yogic terms, because Kundalini is a Sanskrit term and means the coiled one, this potential of energy. And in the yogic system, it was given that kind of both the imagery and experience of it to help communicate that within us and across, that within us is this power to know the infinite as our own self,
Mm.
to know the divine as your own self. That's the underlying power of all mystical traditions. It goes by different names. We'll talk about it as Holy Spirit in the Christian tradition. We can talk about Shekinah in Kabbalah. And each system has a way of describing that there's this power of the divine that both creates, but also can open our consciousness to experience union with the Creator. That we can experience that the Creator, creation, and us as a creature, there's just one. That's all there is. And that is what Kundalini as a power is all about, and that's what the unfolding of Kundalini as a spiritual unfolding, a spiritual set of practices we call sadhana practices, is all about that radical freedom of knowing the divine as our own self and getting free of the mind. What are we getting free of? Identification with the limitations of mind and body. And so the various processes that unfold with Kundalini awakening and transforming our consciousness are all about coming back to what is really seen as our root consciousness to begin with. It doesn't create something that isn't already there. It opens our awareness to the fullest of who and what we are and what all beings are and what all this creation is. This is the divine. There's nothing about it that's not that. But to know that, not as a concept, not as a philosophy, to know that, to experience that, to live that, to breathe that, to walk it into the world with love and compassion, that's the fruit of Kundalini unfolding.
But something, no, I love everything you're saying, and of course, it's life itself, it's the vibe. But also, when it awakens, or if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
there's something else. Also,
Absolutely.
it's
Yep.
a realization, and sometimes that happens intentionally. Sometimes that happens out of nowhere. People
Right.
don't know what's happening. Talk about the awakening of that.
Right, right. So the awakening, and it's a great metaphor, because just think about your everyday experience. You're asleep, maybe you're in a dream, maybe you're in deep sleep, you have nothing. When you wake up, what happens? You become aware of a reality that already existed. You don't wake up and create a new reality. That reality was there, now you're awake, and now you're joining it. So when we talk about the reality that is going to unfold and that we're going to begin to clearly perceive, as well as we perceive ordinary reality, Kundalini and that power of the divine to allow us to know our union and see it all times and all places, that's that unfolding. But the spontaneity of it is quite jarring, because to begin with, we think we're just the ordinary self, the ego mind. I'm just this guy or this woman or this whatever going through life, and it could be spontaneous. It could even be as a result of practice. But I can tell you, even people who, as a result of having done intensive practices, when they actually experience the awakening, it's beyond anything they conceived of. And so it's often disturbing to the ego mind, because the ego mind, the one of the primary functions in a healthy way for the ego mind is prediction and control. Psychologically, the ego mind is all about prediction and control. And that's, you start out the day with a to-do list in your head or things that you have to get done, and it manages life all like that. And it has life kind of tied up in a nice little box where, that's what it's looking at. Now, this entire other force of consciousness inherent to your own being that's bigger, better, badder than the ego mind is now doing it. It's making you shake, or it's making realizations happen, or it's just turning up emotions. Because when we talk about the purificatory process of Kundalini unfolding, it's about getting rid of any impediments to fully knowing and experiencing the divine in the moment. That impediment might be a mistaken belief that we took in as a 4-year-old. I don't know. It could be an injury. It could be a trauma. When you look at it across lifetimes, as the Eastern traditions do, and as meditation begins to open us, we become aware that, this wasn't our first time around the block on this. There are some scars. There are these patterns that are residues of lifetimes of experience that are going to get cleared out. And some of them we have no recollection of, some of them we have no experience of in the moment. We may never make sense of them. As a matter of fact, the poor ordinary mind can get exhausted trying to analyze the content of what are called kriyas, the spontaneous movements of the Shakti Kundalini as it's doing this purificatory work. The poor mind is always trying to make sense of it. And one of the things it has to learn to do is just surrender. Just let it go. Don't try and figure it out. Just Grace is clearing this stuff out, and sometimes she'll also give you the meaning of it, and sometimes it's like, no, just, you're on your way from, the East Coast to the West Coast. You may not have to see every tree in between here and there. You want to get to the end. And that's the Kundalini journey. It's like not everything that happens on that is going to make sense to the ordinary mind, but it's getting cleared. And that's the tumultuous part. That's the part that can be really scary for people, because the ego mind was not often prepared to be, oh, there's this whole other energy, motive force driving the show now. I thought, a lot of people are there doing yoga, and who's their guru? Well, their guru is actually their ego mind, telling them, oh, I feel like doing this asana today. I feel like doing this meditation. Maybe I feel like doing this chant. I think I'll do that, the mantra tomorrow. And so it's just another playground for the ego mind. When Shakti, as the force of the infinite, the true inner guru is moving, then that ordinary mind needs to learn how to take a back seat and surrender, follow, develop the discrimination, develop the refined awareness of what it takes to follow this force that can be also exquisitely subtle in its teaching. So the whole range of our capacities are opened up.
Beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I feel like you are the Shakti herself speaking. You're so much beautiful energy coming forth when you speak. So can I just run by you what happened to me this year? Because I had a guru when I was 27. I'm 52 now, and I started getting Devi Bhav and manifesting Kali. And I know you have a close connection with Kali too, so I love that. And manifesting the mother over the years, and was giving Shaktipat with him, and now I'm giving Shaktipat just with the energy herself and with the backing of Baba, and he works astrally with me. That's been going on for years, and then this year in February I was hit so hard. I've never been scared by the Kundalini in 27 years. I was terrified. It was so intense. I didn't think I'd be able to handle it, and then Shiva just completely took over my body. There was no more Kai. It was like he kept saying, Kai's dead, only Shiva. Kai's gone, only Shiva. And it was terrifying. But then what started happening was past lives. I guess they were my past lives. I don't know, being tortured, hung, burned. Just every single night. This lasted for 40 days. 40 days. Insane energy. So, what do you make of that after 20 some years of being fully in the practice? It's just.
Yeah. And that's what can be stunning for people, is that the Shakti knows when it's done, not you, not your mind. And the ordinary mind can get a little complacent, not consciously so, but it's just, I'm cruising along, I'm doing this, I'm serving that way, it's all good. And then boom, she goes, no, it's time to open up this, closet that needs to be emptied out. And all this stuff comes out. And it's interesting the way you said it, because when you're talking about entering Shiva, and all there is Shiva, that sounded like that preceded some of that experience. Because one of the ways that Shakti really supports a person being able to move through these kinds of purifications is to go into that witness consciousness, to know I am the absolute, I am Shiva, and I can witness this. And that gives us the place to be able to see the unfolding of grace in all its manifestations, but from that place. Now Shiva, of course, is everything. Kai is Shiva, but you have to let go of being identified with Kai, shift to that consciousness, and then later include it all, because it's all that. But that being able to step back and have the Shakti, that wasn't something mind-born. That's not something, and this was one of the really critical components of why Kundalini was so sought after and so prized by yogis, because she does the work that the mind can't do. The mind is the problem. The shadow, the stuff caught in the closets and everything, that is the issue. The mind can't get at that. It takes the one who created the whole drama. The whole drama. The mind is her creation.
Yes.
The mind is a ray of Shakti. So who better to clean it up? Her. And so that's one of the things why yogis realized they would do, literally be prepared to do lifetimes of practice to have that awakening. And the fact is, yogis have been doing practices for now thousands of years. And in the yogic tradition, there's a phenomenon called a yogi brashta. It's somebody who was doing yoga in a former lifetime and didn't complete. They didn't attain the highest.
Mm-hmm.
So they're reborn, and their sadhana continues. Our good practices and the effects of that continue. Well, part of that is why people are having spontaneous awakenings. Spontaneous just means, I wasn't conscious of what I did in another lifetime. That set the stage for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not spontaneous to the Devi. She goes, no, I know the whole course of all your lifetimes, and I know that at this one, this is where it's going to be ready to unfold and blossom. And so what's spontaneous and hidden and mysterious to the ordinary mind is self-luminous to the Devi, to the Shakti. Oh my God, she just revels in it.
But is it a she? Is it a personification? Or
Right.
are we an aspect, this is what I also think, of that greater being? So we think we're separate, but we are that, and we're like a little finger of the great Shakti energy.
You're
Or
both. You're both and neither.
right.
That's the hard part. You're both and neither.
Mhm.
You're both the little individual and the infinite, and you're the infinite transcendent, right? You're what's all beyond that. That's why one of the great mantras says Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnana Purnamidachyate. It's from the infinite comes the infinite, and the infinite remains. From the divine comes the infinite creation, and yet the fullness of the infinite remains undiminished. That's who you are. You're all of that. Right? And she is just a way of talking about sort of the archetype, and this is what I especially liked from my Jungian background, and the archetypal forms, the understanding that the divine feminine, that's a way of understanding that this is the creative power. And as humanity evolved, everything we saw, all forms were born from the feminine. All, didn't matter. The mother was the mother and gave birth to boys and girls, and so that archetypal experience of millions of years of seeing that evolution, we have in our psyche. That face of the infinite, which is faceless, which is attributeless, which has no sex, but that face that we can relate to and connect with as the one that creates and supports and unfolds all that, that's the mother. That's the divine feminine. That's Ma. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you saw her as a very young child, yes?
Yeah. I mean, that's that certainly had me from an early age convinced of past lives, because nobody else knew what I was talking about.
Well, I was going to ask you about your own experience, and can you talk about, this awakening of awareness that happened to you?
Yeah. I mean, I do, and I certainly wrote about it in both the Soul's Journey and the Awakening Kundalini book. But it's when I talk about it, part of my hesitation sometimes is it's not meant to be, this is the model, you should do this, or you should have that. One has to have this, there's a smorgasbord of experiences, and I think I'll take one of those and one of those, and maybe not so much of that. And one of the hallmarks of the awakening, which is really, Shaktipat means the descent of grace. So awakening is, grace is just enlivening our consciousness to become aware of who and what we are beyond the ordinary mind. Who and what this world is beyond our ordinary consciousness. So understanding that when I talk about some of my experiences, it's really to highlight that what's important was the power of grace that opened those doors, and nothing about me or my particular experience. So that's what's really important. And so in that context, for who knows what reason, I woke up as a 3-year-old in my crib, and at night in a raging thunderstorm.
You were in a crib even.
Wow. I was still in a crib, and I love thunderstorms even as a little tyke, And so I'm standing in the crib, and there's lightning flashing, and there's thunder, and it's rain pouring down, all that kind of stuff. And then I look, and I see a lady standing next to my crib, looking at me very just kindly and lovingly. And I don't know, you're 3 years old. Who's going to stand there other than your mom, right? So I just think it's my mother, and I say, "Ma," and she just keeps looking at me, which moms do sometimes. They don't necessarily respond. They just look at you, And the thunderstorm keeps going, and the lightning keeps flashing, but suddenly I start to notice when the lightning flashes, she disappears.
Wow.
And it's only in the dark that I can see her, because she's made of pure light. All she is light. And then I knew this was not mine. And I started to go, "Ma," now I started to be a little 3-year-old in trepidation. "Ma, Ma," and she's just standing, this lady of light just keeps standing over me. And then I scream, "Ma," My mother comes running in from another room, from her bedroom, my parents' bedroom, and as soon as she opens the door, the lady of light disappears. And I talked about her for years. I mean, my brother and sister still remember me talking about the Lady of Light. And so that was my first experience and I was not to be dissuaded. I mean, people would say, "Oh, that was a dream." No. This was a Lady of Light. And actually, as I got into yoga and meditation, almost 20 years later, she reappeared at a different place in a different time, standing beside my bed at night. Just giving me her grace and blessings that, now you found the way. Yoga, meditation.
Great. Beautiful. Wow.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Is that what brought you to Mukbananda's teaching?
Well, yeah, I mean, in part. I mean, I had been having experiences. I knew there was something more. I started practicing meditation, kind of just dabbling, trying to figure it out as my own. I mean, this is like the late 60s, early 70s, end of high school, and various gurus were showing up on the scene with the Beatles and what have you, and there were all these fads, and I was serious. I mean, I really wanted to know, and so I studied some with everybody from Ram Dass to Satchidananda to this one and that one. Did a number of Buddhist practices, studied with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche for a while, and was really taken by the clarity of his teachings. The example of his life wasn't so good, but the clarity of his teachings was extraordinary. And
may I ask, was there Shakti in that tradition?
Oh yeah. And in fact, in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, not just the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, in most traditions, when you get into the more esoteric realms, and they start talking about initiations, even in the Zen tradition, that initiation is a conveyance of power. What is that power? It's Shakti.
Does it manifest in the same way?
Oh yeah. Though sometimes the traditions don't do well with understanding it, because I've gotten calls and emails from people around the world going through Kundalini things, and including some a couple of Zen monks in different monasteries beginning to have Kundalini kriyas, spontaneous movements, and the masters in that tradition just want to like squelch it, and that doesn't work so well. But my introduction was doing the various meditative practices, and then just fortuitously, which is another way of saying the Shakti arranged it all, Mukbananda's translator, this wonderful man, his name was Professor Jain, and you see him in some of the old Baba books. And he came I was helping to run a private Jungian psychiatric treatment center in Litchfield, Connecticut, and he came to help teach yoga just for a little retreat for staff and some of the clients. And he told me about Mukbananda, and he went, "You have to meet him.
Wow.
You have to meet him." And so the next year, it was 76, I met Baba in person upstate in South Fallsburg, and that was that. I was with Baba for a long time. So.
Did he have the emanation? I never met him, but
Yeah.
What did he have that, like?
Mukbananda.
Yeah. What did he have?
Baba was a volcano of Shakti. I mean, his mission was to pass on, Shakti's grace. His mission was to give grace, give Shaktipat to as many as he could before he left the body. I mean, that's what Baba lived for. I mean, in intensives and weekend retreats, by the hundreds of thousands of people would come and to receive that grace. And then move on with their life. Some you never saw again. But he was just always pouring that out into the world.
Wow.
Going back to the Buddhist thing, when I was in my initial stages of my Kundalini awakening, and all kinds of saints were visiting, the Dalai Lama came at one point and sent this huge, like, purple snake through my heart.
Yeah.
So he must be into the Shakti in one way or another.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember having, studying with a Tibetan master who's the head of a ancient monastery in Bhutan. He had come to the United States, and I wrote about it some in that Awakening Kundalini book, because it was a very interesting thing. The Shakti was telling me, I want you to come to know me as Tara. Because, in the ancient Kundalini texts and Kali texts, another name for Kali, because Kali also, it takes the form of Kundalini, is Tara. And so in the Tara tradition and the Buddhist tradition, and so the Shakti said, you should come to know me as Tara as well. And I'm like, of course, Mother, but I don't know anybody who knows Tara, so I hope you arrange that too, And sure enough, now, a couple of months later, somebody contacts me having Kundalini experiences and comes to meet and work with me some, and then it turns out she's connected to a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and she's also had experiences of Tara, and that her master is this extraordinary Tulku, His Eminence Sewang Sita Rinpoche, and he was visiting Memphis, Tennessee, and would I like to go meet him and receive Tara empowerments.
Wow.
And so there it was, and so that's how she arranged that to happen. So,
some people say there's many different energy, like meridians, nadis, like get activated at a particular type of Kundalini. I mean, how do you work with people if something's activated to stabilize it, get, control over this amazing energy?
Right. So, well, one thing is I hope I disabuse people of the notion of controlling the Shakti, because it's ultimately a path of surrender. But how to harmonize, how to get into harmony with it, because the two things that come up for people that are most disruptive for the flow of Shakti are anger and fear. Anger and fear are the two most disruptive emotional, and really affects our emotional body, because when you think of what disturbs people, it's energy running through their physical and subtle body, their mind and body. And so those emotions of fear and anger are the most disruptive. And they're often provoked because the ego mind, when it's confronted with something that's bigger, stronger in power, it goes into fear, or it goes into annoyance, or I'm not getting what I want out of this, and then it gets angry, or I'm getting too much of that, and now I'm afraid. And I mean, it bounces around like a ping pong ball between these different things, and calming it down. But the other thing is, Kundalini was never meant to be a do-it-yourself project. And so it's meant to be done in relationship. In part, the relationship is what helps to stabilize and balance. It's being in connection with, in close proximity even. An entire vast literature that we revere are the Upanishads from the Vedic tradition, the ancient Upanishads. And the word Upanishad means sitting nearby. It was the teachings and the revelations that happened by sitting with a master and being affected. We affect each other. And so when you're in the company of somebody whose Shakti is harmonized and flowing in that way, that helps. The practices, especially mantra. I mean, why Baba and many traditions really emphasize mantra is because it is such a potent tuning fork. Shakti takes the form of mantra. Mantra is an attuned, highly, specific Shakti for also both awakening and calming, feeding, harmonizing the energy, and getting the mind out of the way so it can take refuge in the mantra. So we'll say, take refuge in the mantra. What does that mean? It means keep bringing the mind back to it. Become absorbed in it. If it's Om Namah Shivaya or Om Kali Ma, you're repeating it as much as possible. Most of the time the mind is thinking garbage anyway, so why not have it think something that's going to be useful? So,
wow, great. That helps. Yeah.
yeah.
When someone comes to you with some kind of Kundalini or spiritual awakening, I guess, what do? You size them up and say, what do they need? I mean, how do you work with somebody?
Well, it's a dialogue. I mean, it's a personal dialogue. It's understanding what's going on, some of what's happening for their lives. Often people are initially relieved just learning more. I mean, people come in, it's like in ordinary psychology, Western psychology. We know that in ambiguous situations, we project all kinds of stuff. That's the nature of Rorschach tests. That's the nature of every encounter with somebody we don't know. We start out with a projection. And it might be positive projections, it might be negative projections. So here you're encountering this mysterious force that you may have heard little dribs and drabs about, this is and that. And so often relief begins to happen just by get informed about the workings of it, the sublime nature of it, that this is your innate power of the highest nature, the most loving, exquisite. It wants to transform out of love. It wants to drown every atom, every cell in your body with love. And if we don't get that, we're not getting the picture. People are getting sidetracked by, the minutiae. The mind thinks information is important. And so it wants to get informed about this nadi and that chakra and this number of petals and blah, blah, blah. Nobody ever got enlightened knowing any of that. That's not the unfolding of Kundalini. That's the mind grasping at straws and trying to posture as knowing something. You know the Shakti when you just dissolve into that loving embrace that transforms every moment of your life. If you want to know Shakti, that's what you give into. That's what you surrender to. This is the love that transforms every moment. The great Advaita Vedantin scholar, teacher, master, extraordinary being Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he talked about, what the real initiation of Kali as Kundalini is? He said, she puts you in rapture. She puts you in ecstasy. That's where you dissolve into the one. You can't know the one without becoming the one. Even Meister Eckhart, great Christian mystic, said the same thing. So it's known by every tradition. You don't know the one without becoming the one. Kundalini is the power to dissolve again back into the ocean of your pure being. That's her gift. So people getting sidetracked with all these other things, it's understandable, but it's the mind that does that. And it's the mind then without the proper container of a relationship and a teacher and the wisdom practices that guide a person to don't get sidetracked by this other stuff.
I want everyone to hear that.
Thank you.
I get so many emails of, can you awaken my third eye? Can you do that? Can you give me a, and it's like, no, they need to hear what you just said. They need to feel what you just said. It does. It becomes glib.
Well, it's just, we want to understand it's the ordinary mind's way of trying to gain mastery. If you wanted to master any subject in the world, you'd read all the books you could, and you'd study with some master or something like that. But it was all about information, technique, things like that. This is a whole other paradigm. This is an entire shift of consciousness. You can't study how to change your state from the dream state to the deep sleep state. A change in state doesn't happen through study. Studying is agitation in the mind. Oh, you can inform it, so you better speak about it, or maybe understand, have the ordinary mind reflect on it and understand it, so it can be useful. But it's no substitute for the dissolution, for going into that.
Yeah. I'm just curious, it's a little mind question, but is it more of this awakening seem to be happening now, or has it always been happening like this? And you're just hearing about it?
Right. I don't know the answer to that. I have a theory that just because yogis have been in, the practice of yoga has both expanded and been done for longer and longer periods, that there are more and more souls at that point in evolution. Because when you understand also the context in which the classic Kundalini yoga, not the sort of name branded Western one, but the classic Kundalini yoga, really looked at the evolution of consciousness across lifetimes, and that the awakening only happened at a certain developmental stage. And so awakening of Kundalini was never thought to be everybody on this planet should awaken their Kundalini right now. Mm-hmm. People need to follow the course of their development, and when it's the right time, that will happen. And that's a different understanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, it just seems to me like, however I understand it, the vibration of the incarnational experience seems to be getting closer to the divine.
Right.
That's how I see it. It may just be my perspective.
Right. Well, it's an interesting component of, what's this age, in the Eastern traditions, the cycle of time is divided up into four ages. And starting off with Satya Yuga, where Satya is the truth, it's the highest age, and it's sort of entropy sets in and things go downhill. And we get to the current age, the fourth age, known as Kali Yuga. And in this way, Kali just means dark. It's like the dark age. But one of the positive points about Kali Yuga is that the teachings and the understanding are more accessible now than in any other age. And people may not have the discrimination to really get it the way they did in Satya Yuga, but it's available. Mm-hmm. And so people are bumping into it, and they are feeling, if they have an intuition that there's something more. Our culture is sold us so pathetically short about, the goal of life is to consume and stack up chips for status and possessions or something, and it leaves our soul just dying and starving. But that starving also makes us seekers, and people start turning over the stones and looking for, wait a minute, there's got to be something more than what I'm being told is the meaning of existence in this world. And that too is driving people to look and look deeper and look with their heart.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can word this properly, but since you're here and you are so connected to the mother and Kali, I have a very personal connection with Kali as the mother as well. And even so, when I was a child, I had an invisible friend whose name was Vuni. And as I look back on that, it was Kali. It was this little dark-skinned girl that wore these beautiful Indian dresses and things. Mm. And she hung out with me all the time. I don't remember at what age she went away. And then only in reflection was I able to say, oh my gosh, that was Kali hanging out with me. But the question I have is, and I don't know if you can answer this, it's just that why does God come into a form such as that? Is that because we've worshipped God in that form in previous lifetimes? I mean, obviously that was something I didn't even know about Kali when I was a child. But then I manifested, so I started getting Devi Baba manifesting Kali when my Kundalini was awakened. Do you have any concept of that? Why does God come in a certain form for a certain person?
Yeah, it's about their they're what they are seeking and what that form, how that will fit. And in the yogic tradition, your Ishtadeva, your personal form of the divine, that's the starting point. It's the one you relate to. And then that's a portal to going into more forms and beyond into the formless. And so the infinite is infinite in its creativity. It's infinite in all the forms it will take. And it wants to make itself accessible. I've known people who felt, they had an awakening because they saw the divine in a tree, in just a gorgeous tree in a forest, felt so alive. And they had a Shaktipat experience in the forest alone with a tree. Because they were ripe and ready, and the divine's everywhere. And the divine says, oh, this person has a special affinity for a tree, I'm coming through there. If that's an open door, I'm coming in. So I think the infinite light is looking for any crack in in ourselves that it can put that light in and reveal itself, and then start to go, and now there's more, there's more, there's more. Revelation is endless.
I think that's the purpose of incarnation in these forms, is then to realize the divine.
Yeah, well, there's, in the Eastern traditions, and I think it's, I can safely say it's my experience, is the highest purpose of a human birth, twofold, to know the infinite as ourself, and to serve the divine in everyone, at all times, in all places, to know and to serve. But that, along the way, can take many, many lifetimes where you're not specifically trying to know, you're exploring what it is to be really fulfilling this desire, that impulse, this other thing, learning the lessons along the way, so that we fully explore what it is to be separate and individualized from the infinite, and really from the Kundalini tradition, that is her play. She created these forms because if the infinite could only know infinitude, it would be bound. It would be limited. So it has to be able to experience what it is to be finite, to be limited. In order to do that, it has to create a vehicle. Creation is the vehicle for that. All creation is imbued with consciousness, but the structure of the creation can reflect different forms of that consciousness. So a pebble just has the minimal consciousness of existence. A human, with the complexity of our mind and our brain and everything, we can go beyond even the limitations of physical knowing. So it's recognized that sort of the complexity of the structure will influence how it can manifest the full range of what consciousness is. But consciousness is it. That's all there is. That's what the great quantum physicist David Bohm came to. That not only Einstein, all matter is energy. Bohm took it, he was Einstein's brilliant protege, took it the next step and said, not only is all matter energy, all energy is consciousness. Now you're right in Kashmir Shaivism. Now you're right in with the ancient mystics.
Do you recommend then people trying to activate the Kundalini for? I mean, maybe Kundalini or maybe, I guess, Shaktipat is that. I mean, is that?
Do you give Shaktipat?
Nobody. So this is a slight correction for me to you. Nobody gives Shaktipat. Shakti gives Shaktipat.
Well, yeah.
It's not Kai Pat. It's
No.
not Lawrence Pat. It wasn't Mukbananda Pat. It was Shaktipat. That's a very important distinction to make. You can serve as a conduit, but anybody's will is involved, they're going to experience the karma of that. Because as soon as our will gets involved, we're creating karmas. So the Shaktipat happen around me, through mantras, yeah. And people, humanity in general, seeks self-transcendence. We have to understand it. That's a human urge to seek self-transcendence. That may express itself, pathologically in drugs and alcohol, or addictions, and getting lost. But self-transcendence is something that we seek because we know there's something bigger than our individuality. And to the extent that people then become skillful and understand that meditative practices will help both solidify their ordinary vehicle of mind and body, and also open the doors to what that transcendence how it can be experienced in integrated ways that are truly expansive and inclusive of everyday life.
You encourage people to do practices that will awaken them. Is that what you're saying?
Depends on the practice.
Right.
Some of the leftovers from the old patriarchal yogic tradition, and you read some of the more ancient sort of patriarchally contaminated, in my mind, approaches to Kundalini. It was how to force it. They treated it as an it, and how you had to beat at the doors of the Muladhara and force the awakening of Shakti. It's like this real, with all kinds of forceful pranayamas and everything like that. That's not been my experience as the way to do it. It wasn't certainly the experience of the teachers I've studied with. In fact, one of the most exquisite things around Mukbananda was what would happen, just the gracefulness of the opening and the awakening. It wasn't forceful, and in fact, one time there was a very famous author at the time, came to visit Mukbananda, and this author had written about Kundalini, and I write about this in my books. But he'd come and wanted to have like a private darshan, a private meeting with Mukbananda, and so he's sitting outside of the meeting room where Mukbananda would meet people, and this author has a vision of the goddess Kundalini walking by, going into where Baba was. And she's resplendent. I mean, she's the goddess. She's in a gold sari. She looks like the goddess of the universe. And a little while later, the author gets called in. It's his turn. So he goes in, and he's like looking around for her. And Baba goes, what's up? And he goes, wait a minute, I've had experiences of Kundalini, and he had written about it, and said, when I experienced her, she just looked like an ordinary housewife, just like some female thing, and, nothing much. But I'm sitting out there, I saw her, and she was the magnificent goddess of the universe. How come she appears to you like that? Baba said, because I worship her. Worship is the key. Reverence is the key. Love. That's the key. If you want to draw someone near to you, love, reverence, devotion. You want her gifts of grace. She can't help but give them to you. You approach in that way. Oh my God, she'll bathe you in it.
I love what you're saying, and you're also helping me, which I've always known, that reality is not what we've been taught in the Western model. That is very static. It reminds me of when I went to see this guy who claimed to be sort of a guru. He had Kundalini awakening, but in my opinion, his ego wasn't integrated, so he took credit for it. But while I was there, there was a picture on the wall of Mukbananda, and the picture started to animate. Sorry. It's chain. It's like I kept looking, and it's like, wow, there's something here.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's just shows that the world is way beyond this very limited idea we've been taught.
Yeah. And that's why so many ordinary folks who are having experiences, their ordinary mind isn't prepared for this. Right. We've so gotten enamored with materialism and scientific materialism just as a philosophy, that we've discounted even the mystical domains. Whereas humans are mystics. We're mystics by nature. We have to deny our mystical nature to get bound like this. And Shakti is the saying, no, no, join me. Here's your home. Here's your home. You're infinite. You're boundless. And you can delight in this form that you inhabit. And now it's going to be filled with the light and love of your own being. And you bring that into the world. You walk that into everyday life.
Well, I like how also you bring it into many different, I wouldn't say religions, but practice, like a Huichol. Talk about their manifestation of this divine Shakti.
The Huicholi, the shamanic tradition. Yeah, that was another, the Devi saying, now, I'm here too. Go find that. And I said, I don't know anybody who does that. And of course, she made those connections. And the Huicholi, the shamanic tradition, and they especially revere the mother. And ayahuasca and the medicine plants, it's the mother. That energy that comes through that is the divine mother. And so when I was with Guadalupe, he was the elder, the senior elder of the tradition, and he took us out way off the grid, out into the desert, and for a week, just gone. And he was the same embodiment as the yogis. He had the same kind of Shakti as Baba. And actually, earlier I had studied some of the texts that go back on, the shamanic tradition and the yogic tradition come from the same root. Back in the ancient Siberian shamanic tradition that evolved into yoga, yoga went more into the spiritual domain and enlightenment. Shamanic tradition was more about, how does power help in this earth and on this planet, and certain use of powers for healing, etc. But they have the same source. And so there was this old, Huicholi shaman and setting up the sacred circle on this hilltop out in the desert and opening the gate with the stone and then starting to circumambulate, just like we would do in the temples in India, going around and around the Devi. And summoning the power. How was he summoning it? Through mantra, through divine sounds that he quietly was calling on. And then, birds of power that were his started circling overhead. It was the exact same. It was the exact same. He and I talked about it. He says, yes, it's the same. It's the same. It's all the same.
Yeah, so it's innate in it's innate in human existence.
How do you feel that the Shakti is working with you today, now, in these times, you personally?
It's all there is. There's not a me being worked. That's all there is that. There is no other.
Did it get to a point where you saw it useless to, I'm asking from my own inquiry, did you get to a point where you saw it useless to be in a body? What's the point? Why am I here if I'm identified completely with that? Or did you
As if the body was different than that? The body's not different than that. Nothing is left out. Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. Any sense that there's an impediment by having a body is a delusion in the mind.
Okay.
Bodhisattvas keep coming back with the fullness of their consciousness to have a vehicle to serve in this planet.
Yeah,
that's the one karma that they hold on to, is the bodhisattva vow. That's I've taken for lifetimes. That's the karma that draws you back to then be present and serve, but serve from that place of freedom, of consciousness, of loving compassion is your nature. You are that Buddha nature. That's the same as Shakti. Bodhicitta is the same as Shakti.
Yeah, I think when people take it out on the body, they're really talking about their emotions.
Well, they're talking about limited identification. Their limited identification with, I'm just the body. I'm just this thing. They get identified with thoughts, sensations, gender, all these different things. That limits consciousness. Yes, we need to be able to be free of that, even while in a conventional sense, it remains.
So
But not as a...
everyone's enacting their shock. I mean, if you just look in the world, the guys playing baseball, the people on television, or these doctors doing this, that is the Shakti emanating through everyone.
Right. So that's where the understanding in terms of kind of a philosophical or yogic understanding is that yes, all there is the unfolding of Shakti. But that's very different than when we talk about what does it mean to become conscious of that. That yes, Shakti's manifesting this sweater, this hair on my face, whatever it is, but that's not the same as when we're dialing in and then become aware of the power of consciousness and begin to understand what it is to have the experience of being one with all of that. Even while the multiplicity of all of that continues, it's unity and multiplicity. It's not an either or. It starts out, sometimes you go into unity states and then you come back to ordinary state. You come into unity state, you come back to ordinary state. And it takes that kind of developmental process so that we're starting to go, oh, actually the unity state is never broken. Never broken. The state of meditation is the unity state of consciousness. Meditation practices don't create meditation. They give us access to what's already there all the time, in all places. That state embraces everything.
Right. Beautiful.
So in the body, out of the body, same. No different.
What? Yeah. Yeah. In and out is relative to what? There is no outside of Shakti.
One thing I'm curious about is, the Shakti, I get what you're saying from my intellect anyway, and from experience, but is time evolving? Is the Shakti itself moving? Or is it eternal, static, stationary? Or is it both that may be
Right.
beyond the mind?
Beyond the mind.
It's
Beyond
both.
the mind.
Yeah.
Beyond the mind.
Yeah, I get it.
The part can't know the whole. The whole can know the part. The part can't know the whole.
You have to become the whole in order to...
Yeah. And then you see through that, and then you discover it can't be spoken about. There are mysteries that remain a mystery to the mind. I mean, that's something I write about in The Soul's Journey and in the Kundalini Awakening. There are things for which it will forever be a mystery to the mind, but not to your consciousness. It humbles the mind that it can only go so far. And then mind is a separate, limited construct. And the dissolution of that into the infinite is beyond its ability to know, to hold, to enter. It can be informed by that, but it doesn't go there.
Is there anything
So-
you... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Todd. Go ahead.
Well, I was just, so when a person has a near-death experience and they have that very real experience of leaving the body, going to the light, whatever it is, and now they're in pure love, and then they
Right.
recognize, oh, this is real. This
Right.
is, that's not. When you reach that state, there is no transformation at the time of body dissolution.
Well, there can be transformation if you start to discover that, oh, my consciousness wasn't limited to the body. But even in those kinds of near-death experiences, they're still dualistic. There's me
Right.
in the experience. There's me in the divine. There's me in the light. They're dualistic. And that's why evolution across lifetimes looks at, yeah, you're going to come and go and die and be reborn and go through various phases of embodiment and disembodiment, but that doesn't guarantee dissolution into unity states.
Right.
That's a whole other state of consciousness.
So
So
when
transcendence Transcendence happens in the expansiveness of awareness. You transcend the body. You can still transcend the body and still have a limited eye awareness. You can transcend roles, have limited eye awareness. You can transcend and have at the death of the body and still have a limited eye awareness. Not the same limitation as being identified with the body and concrete in its nature, but still limited. And that's why the evolution to get to the place where you're ready to shed all limitations, all limited identifications, even while still being able to perceive the play of them. To put them on. This is why, metaphor and myth become so important as a language to try and convey it. So in Kashmir Shaivism, we'll talk about, it's like the actor putting on the garb of the role they're going to play. They don't get lost in it. They play Shakespeare. They play, King Henry VIII, whatever. But they never forget who they are. You're Shakti playing at being Kai. But you're the part, Kai is the part that forgot. Now she had to remember. Then when she remembers completely, then she'll get to play as both. Then you'll know, oh yeah, I delight as Kai and I delight as the infinite. And it's all simultaneous.
Beautiful.
So when a being like Nityananda drops the body from our perception, that's probably not his perception at all. Would that be?
Well,
he's already there.
Yeah, he's already there. And you can ask him. He'll tell you.
He only visits me every once in a while. I never think of a question. I'll try to think.
Well, are you having ongoing mystical experiences, if you want to share, or is it pretty much, I don't know, the world as most people know it?
No, it's that. I mean, this is part of the gift of this power of consciousness. Is our nature. Every moment is a revelation. Every moment is meditation. How could there be anything but that? Anything other than that is just the ordinary mind. So the unfolding of the divine is the divine delighting in its unfolding. In all its horror as well as all its beauty, nothing left out. Nothing. You don't go, oh, now the mind, the mind projects its tendencies. So the mind has something novel and it's very delicious. But then it eats too much of it and gets bored with it and goes, that's not so good anymore. That's not the mystical experience. She's called the maiden Uma, the one who's ever new. Baba used to talk about it. Ever new. Yeah, because every moment is the unfolding of the infinite. Every moment is revelation. Every moment, that revelation is meditation. There's nothing but that.
Yeah. So what would you say, I mean, you've been talking to people watching, but what would you say to people watching to sort of, I mean, you've been doing it, to sort of fine-tune them, get them in, more in touch with this divine union that we are?
One of the best integrative practices is to ask yourself, who am I now? Who am I now? Who have I become now? Because moment by moment, thought by thought, feeling by feeling, experience by experience, role, relationship, we are defining ourselves and becoming that, inhabiting that, feeling bound by that, limited by that. So one of the key questions comes out of self-inquiry, out of Vedanta, out of a non-dualistic perspective. Get the mind to at least, who am I now? Who have I become? And drop it. Come back to the truth. The truth is Hamsa. I am that. I am the infinite. Shivoham, Shivoham, Chidananda Rupa. Shivoham, Shivoham. I am consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. That's what reflects the truth. They're still words, but at least they point in the right direction. Right? That's the awareness you're going for. So asking yourself in the moment, who have I become now? Who am I now? You start to get a little contracted. Oh, who did I become? And you'll see. Oh, I got identified with this. I got caught in that feeling. I saw this other person as that. Now you're in this web of identifications. Let him go. Let him go. Come home. Come home to yourself. That's all there is. So what I plead with people, this is all there is. I'm very passionate about it.
Well, if the emotions come up from what you're saying, or someone cuts you off in traffic, and
Yeah,
you have this response,
yeah,
you go back to who
yeah.
am I now?
Who am I now? Why would I want to become that? Because we're not choosing to become that. It's the automaticity of the conditioned mind to become one thing after another, all day long until it's exhausted, falls asleep, goes unconscious, and wakes up and does it again. But to start introducing consciousness, some self-reflection. Who am I now? What did I become? Look at that. Buddha said it. As you think, so you become. So watch your thoughts with care. Let them arise out of compassion for all beings.
How many people hear you?
Never counted.
I mean, how many people truly hear you?
No, I don't know. Not my job to know.
But you must be able to sense, they say around like Ananda Maima, how many people were enlightened?
Yeah.
Around the great saints, how many people truly
People listen. I mean, there are people here on different levels. I mean, nobody's any more divine or less divine. It's like Baba used to talk about the Lord's Club. He says, we're in the Lord's Club. Everyone's God. Yeah, somebody has to play at cleaning the toilets, and somebody has to play at sitting on the guru seat. This time I'm doing that. Next time, I don't know. We'll see. It's like, it's all the divine. To have that equal vision, that's part of what we start to see. Now, on the other hand, we see that then suffering comes from being caught in the belief that I'm just this little thing. I'm just this little being, I'm just this little guy, or I'm just this little woman, or I'm just this little person, or I'm just this, that. The suffering comes from the identification with these limited self constructs.
No, thank you.
So know that you're the one. Know, Shivoham, Shivoham. Know that. That means I am the absolute. I am the auspicious one. Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. Chidananda means I am the nature of consciousness and bliss. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham.
So what you said to Kai, it's not about the body, because if you really want to be that, then, not having a body it doesn't mean your consciousness is more evolved.
Right.
So
yeah, every time you've died for millions of lifetimes, you've gone through a period of not having a body.
But do we come back in the body to evolve consciousness?
Yeah. Well, evolve your experience of consciousness.
It's a faster vehicle for that. I mean, I don't know faster, slow, but
right.
I mean, I don't know.
You mean as opposed to coming into something else?
Or not having a body. I mean, you can still evolve.
Well, there are other planes where evolution continues. And so it's not like you're always going to be karmically bound. There's levels in which you can be done with the karma of the lessons. This is called karma bhumi. The earth plane is called karma bhumi. And so it's a particular plane of existence for really understanding karma is cause and effect. And so things are very concrete here. The effects of our actions tend to be very concrete, and we have to get it because we start out kind of unconscious. And so we have to start out in kindergarten. And then as you advance, you can get to the place where you don't need a body anymore, but you're still evolving. Or you might get to a place where you advance beyond that, but you've evolved to this place that, no, I'm compelled by compassion to keep coming back. That's the bodhisattva path. To keep trying to support anybody awakening along the way until all know that they are free.
And one that comes in for that purpose, do they still have to go through that period of remembering, or do they just know?
Often. I mean, both happen. Betty Baba was a born siddha. Mukbananda came in and went through sadhana under Betty Baba.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what's like, do you have where are you going with all this? I mean, you're just, what's happening for you? I'm just curious.
I serve. I serve. You know, we have the nonprofit organization, so we put on weekly free meditation programs now on Zoom, offer courses and retreats when we can. Of course, all that's on hold with COVID, but also the writings and then putting out the free videos from all the weekly satsangs so that they're available to support people in understanding and deepening their understanding. So, you know, writing, putting things out, you know, thank you for helping me with my seva, inviting me here so I can talk to another audience that may not have heard this. And, you know, that's all I do. That's what I'm here for.
So how can people find you? What's your website?
Well, they can find me at thesoulsjourney.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the Anamkara meditation .org. Anamkara is an ancient Gaelic term, means friend of the soul. And so the Anamkara Meditation Foundation is the nonprofit I run for making programs available to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there the Irish poet that used that term?
Yeah, John O'Donoghue.
Oh yeah, did you know him?
I didn't know him, no. I loved his writings, but it's an ancient term, and so he made good use of it.
Yeah. And your books are Kundalini?
One is Awakening Kundalini, The Path to Radical Freedom. One is The Soul's Journey, Guidance from the Divine Within. One is a collection of kind of ecstatic poetry from the mother. That's called Kali's Bazaar, penned by Kalidas. And then there's some other works, you know, that I did for Sounds True as a part of their, you know, one of many authors in their book Kundalini Arising, and you know, articles and other things around. So
I wanted to see if we have any questions on the live stream.
Well, thank you for your time anyway, Lauren.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. So beautiful.
Yeah. But,
and we also have there's, I don't know if that's up on your screen, but
yeah.
This
the
Om Namah Shivaya meditations. Let me get rid of the. I'm trying to get rid of the there. Om Namah Shivaya meditations and chants. So that's a CD with guided meditation, but longer Om Namah Shivaya. Some other chants and mantras on there, all for helping to calm and soothe and even awaken Kundalini. Silent meditation tracks just to time that, so people enjoyed that, and that you can just download from CD Baby or Amazon or wherever.
Are you still connected to Siddha Yoga, or you've done your own?
Yeah, no, I haven't been involved with the Siddha Yoga Foundation in decades. So,
any questions, Ty?
There are, but it seems like someone was asking about how do you deal with terror. I would say the questions could really be answered in his book. Huh. I would say that to the people that are asking questions, really read his books. I read his book this week, and as I expressed to him, I could have read it so much more slowly, and I could read it over and over and over again. And it helped me with some of my own questions of what I've been going through this year. So I really recommend reading his books. I think your question will be answered.
And the CD, the audio program, that's actually on the shelf behind me. You can sort of see it. And that's 7.5 hours. That's downloadable through Sounds True or Amazon or whatever. And that has also guided practices that help to calm the mind and body and really help to harmonize and integrate. So we made use of that audio format to be able to do that from Sounds True.
Languages. I think I have to go soon, but hey,
thanks,
Lauren.
Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me here, and God bless you and all your good works.
Maybe I will visit you sometime.
Yeah.
I would love to visit you. I guess when this whole COVID thing.
Yeah. It's got to end sometime.
Because you're not doing live programs right now.
No, we're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you are doing online satsangs.
Yeah, and the programs are live, but they're streamed via Zoom every Thursday evening at 7:15 Eastern Time.
Wonderful.
Where are they streamed?
They're streamed through Zoom, and the links and everything are on the Anamkara website. And there's an Anamkara e-newsletter that also we put out that people can sign up for, and that gives both announcements and just quotes and support and information for helping people really engage in meditation. Anamkar is a nonprofit, and its mission is to make meditative practices freely available to everyone.
That's great. So
Yeah.
you have so many resources for the
Yeah.
questions that were asked. I think.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kai.
Yeah.
Alan, thank you, thank you, thank you. So grateful to have you.
Great, great. All right. Well, take good care.
You too.
Jai Ma.
I know.
That's all there is.
Okay.